enjoying this course, as we know that these days we are trying to utilize the solar energy in a variety of ways, especially, PV solar power is gaining a lot of attention these days. So you must have enjoyed the earlier lectures also. So today we welcome Dr. Madhusudan Rao. He's expert, in this area. He's the founder and MD of Urja Energy. His expertise is in clean tech heating, cooling, and ventilation solutions. He has 4 patents filed in this field. He's a pioneer in introducing many new technologies at a commercial scale in India. These technologies include radiant cooling, geothermal cooling, solar and waste heat-based cooling. He has been at the forefront of promoting low energy and healthy building in India. He holds a bachelor's in mechanical engineering and has a professional degree from Terry University and Stanford Graduate School of Business. He is currently the chair of technical group on radiant cooling in ISHRE, Indian Society of Heating, Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Engineers. And he is actively involved in various R&D activities in this space in India. So, dear participant, it is a golden opportunity for all of you to learn from his experience, and you can utilize that experience in designing the solar system, because these days we are trying to cut down the energy, we are trying to cut down the pollution, and the solar energy being renewable energy, so it can be really all of us should try to substitute wherever possible the use of solar energy, and it will make the buildings also more energy efficient. So now I welcome I ask Dr. Madhusudan Rao to start his lecture on this topic.
Sure, sir. Thank you for the kind introduction. I can start sharing, right?
Yes.
Yes. Share content is top. Yes, sir. Come.
So good morning, everyone.
Good morning, sir.
I will start my presentation with something called low energy cooling. And though this seminar is primarily about solar energy and its storage and its utilization, what I have observed is many times the solar cooling or solar related projects, especially in the field, become unviable because we are oversizing the systems, and therefore I will first focus on how we can lower the energy that is required, so that tomorrow if you are trying to incorporate solar and run this through solar, you will not have to size the field very large. Okay. And in any case, this is a topic very close to my heart. So there are not everything that I will share in this particular presentation will be related to solar, but you will understand as there are few projects in which we have used solar and how we have optimized the use of solar. In terms of cooling or heating, unfortunately, there are not many projects. There are few projects which have been done in this field, and I'll share what we have done and also share some which others have done. So I'll first focus on certain low energy cooling systems that we've been working on. So be patient with me on this, and then in the next session, we will move on to purely solar-based heating and solar-based cooling. Okay. Just a little introduction about what we do so that each of you has some idea where we are coming from, and in case you need any help from us in your projects, so that you are aware. We're primarily working in these areas: cooling, heating, water and effluents, and power. But everything that we do is based on heat transfer or thermodynamics. Even for water and effluents, we use only thermal means. That is what our specialization is. We work all over the country. We've done projects across. These are our past research associations for various projects that we've been involved in. You will observe that there is a mix of solar thermal as well as buildings in this. So, been trying to integrate solar thermal in building heating as well as cooling. I'll share some of the projects that we have done in this, some recognition that we've got in India and abroad. Now, before we jump into the low energy cooling technologies, I just want to lay down the background of why it is important for us to focus on low energy cooling, where solar also can be part of it. Okay. A large section of our country will not receive solar energy for a long period. I mean, 3 months, 4 months. So we still need to have systems that consume less energy. And there are a lot of buildings which work
Sorry,
24
but
hours.
1 minute, sir.
Hello.
Sir, on your screen, right side mask, could you minimize that? Yes, that one. Please minimize. Thank you, sir. Right now it's fine.
Okay. Right. So I want to stress the important as to why we as a nation need to look at low energy cooling. Okay. Today, if you see in all the cooling systems that we are aware of, use a significant amount of energy, in my opinion, and these technologies mostly are coming from countries which have very low energy density required for cooling. Okay, so therefore, what is expected, if you see International Energy Agency's projections or even Government of India's projections, India is now poised for an explosive growth in cooling demand. If you see this graph, currently you will see India uses probably around 25 gigawatt of power, requires 25 gigawatt of power to provide cooling to all its buildings. That, and which is very less compared to what China and US is using. Of course, EU does not require much, but if you see, still we are using significant amount of energy compared to other countries. From here, we are going to jump to the top position in next 30 years. We are going to need roughly about 825 to 850 gigawatts of power just to cool our buildings, which means a 40x, nearly a 40x increase in power gen. Just to put these things in perspective, today India's total power generation capacity is somewhere around 378, 380 gigawatts. So in 30 years, we need to have more than double what our current total capacity is just to cool our buildings. I don't think there are enough resources to fuel this kind of energy need with us. So we need to look at if this is going to be the biggest energy guzzler in the coming years, we need to focus and see how we can design buildings that consume less and less energy for cooling. And this takes a very important, see, for if you look at European Union, it doesn't matter much because their energy is not increasing in the way it is increasing. India is also going to be the place where there is going to be the largest stock of buildings in the world by 2050. So, and 75% of these are yet to be built. So, if we are able to get these right, then we will be able to, we don't need to go back and retrofit and correct all our cooling systems in buildings. So, tomorrow we will have an opportunity if we are able to reduce, let's say, the energy consumption of the cooling energy consumption for cooling in a building by 50%, 60%, 90%, 95%. These are possible. Then it is entirely possible for us to drive them through a renewable means like solar. That is what would make it viable. Today, if you, the reason why we don't see many solar cooling projects, I mean, they are just a handful across the country, is because the energy demand for cooling is so high that one, you don't have place to put, let's say if some IT company, let's say Google or Amazon wants to power all its cooling requirement using solar, even if they have intentions, the amount of area available is less compared to the demand, the energy demand that is there. So if we reduce the energy demand, then we get into a position where we can possibly fuel this demand for cooling, the energy demand for cooling through solar, if not 100%, maybe 50%, 60, 70%. Okay. So this is the point I wanted to make before we go into what is the technology. And the estimates from International Energy Agency also shows that India has the highest potential for these energy efficient cooling. So we should focus a lot of our energy on reducing the cooling energy demand. So with that, I will first I'll explain in my presentation basically three technologies: radiant cooling, structure cooling, and to some extent geothermal cooling. And during this, I'll also explain how radiant cooling has been integrated with solar thermal in some cases. So let me first start with something called radiant cooling. And this is a technology that we've been using to reduce the energy consumption for cooling in buildings by 30 to 50%, depending on what you are comparing it against. And to explain this concept, I would like to take all of you back to our high school science, where we know cooling, or at least to me, cooling is a process of taking the heat away. So cooling is a heat transfer process to me. And we all know heat transfer, we have three modes of it. Today, we are primarily using convective-based heat transfer for cooling, which is what we call air conditioning, where we are using air as a means of heat transfer. Hot air goes to an air handling unit or an evaporator, cools, comes back, picks up heat from all other heat sources in the space and goes back again. So this is what we do in air conditioning. or you're using air as a means of heat transfer. In radiant cooling, the primary mode of heat transfer is radiant heat transfer, where a body at a higher temperature will radiate heat to something that is at a lower temperature. So as long as we create enough heat sinks, we will be able to absorb the heat from all other heat sources in the space. Now, this is the principle. How do we do it and why should we do it? What are the advantages? We'll come into that. Before that, I wanted to explain two other aspects that we tend to ignore or is not understood well when we use air conditioning. The way we have evolved biologically over thousands of years also, we have to understand that our body is also radiating heat to its surroundings. And for centuries, the way buildings were built was to provide heat sinks in our body. Our body has metabolism, so just like engine, we produce energy, heat, and that is why our skin temperature would be anywhere between 32 to maybe 36, depending on which part of the body we are measuring. So the buildings of the past, they use so much thermal mass. You would probably see old buildings, really old buildings with maybe 2 feet or 3 feet wall thickness. There was so much thermal mass. Why should people need it? One is protection, of course, in those days, but everybody used to have. The idea was to keep the inner wall surface cooler at 26 degrees, 27 degrees, so that, or even 24 degrees, so that it acts as a heat sink for our body and other heat sources that may be there in the space, right? So if my body is at, let's say, 32 degrees centigrade, and I have surface which is at 27 degrees centigrade, we convert that into Kelvin, we know what is the heat transfer equation there. Stefan-Boltzmann constant, T1 to the power of 4 minus T2 to the power of 4. So it's to the 4th power, so each degree change will significantly increase the heat transfer rate there. So this is why you will see all the old buildings didn't need air conditioning, more or less, and you were still comfortable because the inner walls never got hot. And they would not radiate heat to you, but will act as heat sink, absorbing the heat from you, and therefore very comfortable in such buildings. The moment we started reducing the building thicknesses, right? So what happened? The heat had less resistance, and therefore the inner wall surfaces started rising to an extent that now sometimes the external wall is not even there. There's just glazing, structural glazing of 4 mm. So the inner surface temperatures that today we are exposed to sometimes go in excess of 40 degrees centigrade, right? And that is why we require more cooling. Now, human comfort, we know, is dependent on these variables. But the temperature variables, if you see, we tend to ignore. We only take air temperature in a space. Okay. We only measure how much temperature, 24 degrees is there or not, right? But what we forget is a very, very important aspect of the temperature, which is the mean radiant temperature. Mean radiant temperature is the average surface temperature of all the surfaces that the occupant is exposed to in a space. If you are in a room, then all the 4 walls or even the window glazing, ceiling and floor, these are the surfaces. If you take the weighted average temperature of that, that would be mean radiant temperature. And what we experience is actually operative temperature. Sure, all of you know, but in practice, what many tend to do in the HVAC field is we just measure the air temperature. Because we have, in air conditioning systems, we have no way of controlling the mean radiant temperature. And this can be easily understood on a summer evening, let's say many times when you walk in, or any time in summer, let's say you walk inside a building or a house, your own house, you will experience, if the temperature is about 30, 33, 34, you will feel discomfort, significant discomfort. Even though the air temperature is only 33, the discomfort is coming from the temperature of the surfaces that you are exposed to, because even they are radiating heat to you. If those surface temperatures are about 35, 40 degrees centigrade, which they are usually, I'll show some thermographs related to that, they will radiate heat to you in addition, because then you're not able to evacuate the heat that your body is producing, okay, unless there is some convective air, cooler air coming. But even if air is hotter, then even the convective heat transfer will not be much. But if you are standing under a tree, let's say outside, even in 40 degrees, you will not feel similar discomfort. The reason is the air temperature may be higher, but there are no other heat sources like the surfaces at high temperature of 40 degrees that you experience inside a room that are there now. So your operative temperature will be much lower, and that is what determines the comfort. So there is this graph. If we assume that the operative temperature, I mean, operative temperature is some function of the dry bulb temperature and mean radiant temperature, but let's assume that function as a mean function, right? If you assume that as a mean function, okay, then I can experience the same comfort. Let's say I want to experience 20 degrees, comfort at 20 degrees. Now, that can be experienced with having the dry bulb at 18 degrees centigrade and the mean radiant at temperature at 20 degrees centigrade along this blue line. It can also be experienced, the same comfort I can experience, okay, at air temperature of 22 and the mean radiant temperature at 18. This is what people used to do earlier, before we had air conditioning and concrete and structural glazing. They would try to have as much thermal mass as possible so that even at a higher air temperature, they would feel comfortable because the mean radiant temperature was lower. So I will come back to these concepts later, and I can pause for a couple of minutes here if there are any questions. Srinivas sir, how are we handling the questions towards the end, or are they in between? Are they putting some questions in the chat?
Sir, questions we plan at the end of the section.
Okay, okay. But if there are questions, which I mean, people can type the questions in the chat window here. And what I would request, Dr. Srinivas, is if you feel relevant to be clarified then and there, ask them. I can stop and clarify. It's better for me to just clarify it at that point rather than waiting for everything towards the end. Right? We have enough time, so I'll pause from time to time, every maybe 15 minutes or something. I'll pause and check with you if there are.
Sir.
Yes.
May I ask?
Okay.
May I ask, sir?
Go ahead.
Sir, thanks, Gaurav. This is very interesting right from the beginning. Totally engrossed in the delivery of the content. Sir, my little issue is about because are we concerned about those installation of the window type AC? They are the most radiant of the heat while it's functioning. There is a lot of heat radiated while the window type AC are working. Is there any concern of someone who is taking care for those things? At one side, we are getting the cooling effect, but it is affecting the outward. So, इसके लिए कोई amendment, कोई modification, कोई इसको रिडक्शन का, because it's a nuisance. So is there any development on this issue?
Yes, there is. You can Google something called Global Cooling Prize. There are few. This is a worldwide effort that is was undertaken in India as well as everywhere else, where they're trying to redesign this window AC so that we can reduce energy and consumption. So there are different designs which are proposed. You can when you find time, please Google on.
Sure. Sir, my only Sir, my only issue was that most of the devices, the heat radiated, I don't find we are able to contain them. This is my general observation. We are living as it is, whether it is a bulb, whether it is a TV, whether it is a laptop, this heat is radiated to the atmosphere.
Yes. So, yeah, there are, we at least lighting, we have now become better,
Yeah,
people are
very true.
LED. So there will be, I believe, advances. So, but there's other issue with that is the moment you make it less energy consumption, people want bigger. आपके पास 20 इंच का टीवी होता था, अभी people want 35 इंच बड़ा energy consume नहीं करता है ज़्यादा, right? छोटी गाड़ी थी, अब बड़ी-बड़ी, I mean 800 सीसी की गाड़ी थी, अब लोगों को
हाँ नहीं सर, मैं थोड़ा सा रफ वे में, sorry, I have to your permission, I interacted in between. See that heat dissipated, somehow we are able to contain it, and because energy is a convertible issue, so we are able to convert to some storage, electrical charge within that media. This is very vague idea, it is only my feel कि whether उसको बाहर जाने के हम उसको contain करके कोई बैटरी में कुछ ऐसा कुछ कर लें.
So I'll explain what we do. So all this heat is created. What we create is a heat sink in the floor. Okay. A heat sink. There are different ways we can implement this radiant cooling.
Good.
And the idea there is to provide
this illustration is quite good. Yeah.
So if we provide a heat sink like this, where we have a cool floor, it will absorb all the heat from all the other heat sources.
Right, sir. That's good idea. जी sir, बिल्कुल ठीक है.
So this is what we do in radiant cooling. We embed pipes in the floor. I'll show videos in a couple of minutes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. जी sir.
So whether it is flow, radiation from the equipment or radiation from the occupants or glazing,
जी sir.
Floor becomes the heat sink.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Similarly, we can implement in a way where ceiling becomes the heat sink by embedding pipes. What I'll do is I'll just show a couple of videos just to illustrate how this works, because many of you might not be familiar. I'll first show the floor cooling. This is an installation we did quite many years ago, and as I said, in radiant cooling, we are trying to create heat sinks that absorb heat. So this is a retrofit job we did where we embedded pipes in the ceiling. Okay. Why do we need pipes? Because we are basically constructing a heat exchanger in situ. Okay. Generally, we are used to heat exchangers which are factory fabricated. You have fin and tube, shell and tube, all this, whose capacity and everything is tested at the factory. In this case, the heat exchanger actually is constructed at site in situ. So a network of pipes is connected to a distribution manifold. We check once the pressure is tested. We plaster it. All the electrical and firefighting coordination is done. So what happens? now is your entire ceiling acts as a heat sink the moment we cool it. The fluid circulating in the pipes takes the heat away. The heat is radiated to the surface. From this, it conducts through the plaster through the pipe into the water that is circulating, and water takes away that heat. Similarly, we can also create such heat sink in the floor. Okay. Now, in order not to lose or gain heat from the flow, from the ground, we have used insulation here, EPS insulation. And on top of EPS insulation, we have again put pipes with a vapor barrier. And as I said, our effort again here is to create a heat sink. We ensure that there is no leakage by doing a pressure test for 24 hours. And once it is done, we screed it, put tiles on it, and you will not know that there is actually a cooling system that is operating here. Okay. This is the final space as how you see it. You will generally not see any ducts or any noise that accompanies air conditioning systems. Normally, there won't be any noise of the air. We will use air systems, but that is only for ventilation. I'll come to that part also. But you will see that by running only radiant cooling system, we were able to achieve the desired temperature, but not the RH. Therefore, we do require an air system that will control the humidity in the air. If it's a property of the air, then I need air system, but that is significantly lower, usually about 10 to 15%, depending on where the location is. So this is one way of installing. Okay, but we have done installation in other ways too. This is during the construction of a building for a university in South called KL University. This is in Vijayawada. This building is ground plus 7 floors in all. During the construction of the building itself, we embedded pipes in the slab of that building. Okay. The reason why we have used slab is about 150 mm thick and concrete. The slab, cooling the slab also provides us storage. So even if there is no power for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, it doesn't matter because you have so much cooling energy stored in the concrete. So similarly, we do the pressure testing. Once pressure withstands, you can see that there's no problem with the pipes. People are walking on it. Okay. So this is how another type of installation. All these are, the effect of all of this is same. It is construction of a heat exchanger in situ. We are just embedding pipes in various civil elements, and based on the heat transfer coefficient of that, and other parameters that we require, surface area and inlet and outlet temperatures, finally that heat exchanger will deliver a certain output. I'll show another video, which is a different type of installation, where we are using, if you see, this is an industrial warehouse where the finished goods of a pharma company are being stored. The original tonnage here was 130 tons. We have completed the entire project within 72 tons, of which 26 tons is used occasionally, but because that is used only for control of humidity. So primarily 50 tons is what the sensible cooling that is required here. I'll explain in a bit as to why how we were able to reduce. And this is exactly why I have been saying that there are very simple ways by which we can significantly reduce energy consumption for our cooling requirements. And that should be our first step to any solar or renewable based cooling. We look at first reduce the energy demand so that the renewable energy that you require will be less. So all the panels that you see here and on the walls are the ones that are the heat sinks. I'll quickly show how those panels look. Those panels look like this. This is the construction of that panel, aluminum sheet with embedded in copper. So this functions, this does 3 jobs. What it does is, I will again jump back, sorry, but I just want to show why we constructed something like this. So the right side, the thermograph that you see on the right is the temperature of the ceiling at peak that we took before we started the project. Okay. And we identified this as a main source of heat. So our contention was that why should we let the heat in first and energy guzzling equipment to take it out? So what we did was, our panel, we used aluminum reflective sheet with 80% reflectivity, so that if that is a major source of heat, why don't we reflect that heat and exhaust that air? So once we did that, the load itself fell down by 40%. We didn't have to bring that heat in and then use air conditioning to remove it, or any other system. Okay. The best way for us was to just take it away and not let it enter the space. So we used aluminum reflective foil and some exhaust fans, ventilation fans, to remove that heat before it comes inside. Next, there was 1 inch of insulation, which would prevent whatever was not reflected. And lastly, copper pipes, which carry the cold water to actively remove the remaining heat from inside, as well as what is trying to infiltrate from outside. So that was, so that is how we create different ways we create heat sinks to remove the heat, and that is how we use radiant cooling. But why go to all this effort when you can just, put air conditioning? So I'll explain using air conditioning itself as to why radiant cooling makes sense in terms of energy, and later also in terms of keeping the building healthy. So all of us are aware of this, right? I mean, this side of a system. Generally, we deal with large scale installations. So I will always refer to such installations where there is a chiller, there is an air handling unit, ducts, and all that. Okay. We generally deal in centralized systems. We do not install any split units or smaller units. Our focus is on commercial air conditioning, because that usually operates throughout the year. In some places, it operates 24/7, right? So that is where there's most opportunity to reduce energy consumption. So that's why we focus that. So this is a typical large scale installation where you have a chiller, and which is supplying chilled water at 7 degrees centigrade typically to multiple air handling units. And each air handling unit is connected to a network of ducts, and that is delivering the cold air, and then that hotter air is pulled back by the fan motor. If you see, most of the efforts in HVAC in energy efficiency are focused on chiller efficiency, chiller plant efficiency, pump efficiency, compressor, better compressor, and or what we call the high side or the cooling generation side. But the cooling distribution side has remained the same for almost 5 decades or maybe more than that, right? We have the same box with a fan, with a coil connected to a network of ducts. Nothing has changed in that except those motors are now connected to VFD. So it is this part that we want to bring efficiency in. If we bring efficiency in the distribution part, that will cascade upwards and provide efficiency even in the generation side without doing anything, even if you use any kind of chiller. How is that? I'll explain. So today, if you see, what we do is we take the air at 26 degrees centigrade and then pass it. Let's assume a space of, let's say, 10,000 square feet. At 10,000 square feet, let's assume there are 10 classrooms of each of 1,000 square feet, right? And in each of these rooms, air is being pumped. Now, air is collected from all these rooms, comes to a central air handling unit, and air passes over this coil. Now imagine the entire load of all these 10 rooms of that entire 10,000 square feet is coming to one place on a small heat exchanger. So the heat exchange has to be very rapid. Within less than a second, the air will go from 26 degrees centigrade to, let's say, 14 degrees centigrade. To maintain 24 degrees centigrade, typically we supply 14 degrees centigrade air. So for such rapid heat transfer, of course, there has to be a significant temperature difference, right? Only then there will be a rapid heat transfer. That's why you need very cold water at 7 degrees or so. The coil temperature on an average is 9 degrees centigrade. So this is how it works. But imagine if I were to pluck this heat exchanger from here, okay, and spread it all in the ceiling in all of these 10 classrooms, so each of 1,000 square feet, what will happen? First, we will not require the fan motor, right? We know, because the heat exchanger itself is in the space now. We don't need to move air or hot air, or we don't need a heat exchange medium now. We don't require heat exchange medium, so we can do away with this fan motor. So that is one connected load less. Second is, and probably this is the only equation I will use in the entire presentation, unlike maybe the other presentations you've been having. Mine is not very, equation heavy. I'm sharing what my experience in the field is. So I will keep it that way. So this will probably be the only equation you will see. So what have we done? We have massively increased. So this is the heat transfer equation, right? For any room, right, or any space, some heat transfer coefficient into surface area into delta T, or delta T could be an LMT, basically LMTD. Okay. If I increase the surface area massively, right, from this one small coil in the AHU room to spreading it on the ceilings of all 10 rooms, I have increased the surface area massively, which means my delta T or LMTD can be low, which means my coil temperature can be closer to the return air temperature and still achieve the same amount of heat transfer, which is what happens in radiant cooling. Okay. That is why we are creating all these heat sinks in the space, so that we have increased the surface area massively. So we need to reduce the temperature. We can reduce the, reduce the temperature difference, which means we can increase the temperature of the coil. So all you saw here So the surface temperature here of this floor would typically be somewhere between 20 to 22 degrees centigrade. To maintain something even at 24 degrees or 25 degrees, I'll show you data related to that. So that is what happens in radiant cooling. Essentially, the chiller remains, the ducting and air handling units are typically eliminated or significantly reduced. And why is that there is better efficiency? If you look at, if you're using air as a means of heat transport, okay, that is what we are doing in air conditioning. 1 cubic meter of air can do only 1.25 kilojoules of heat transfer per degree change in temperature, right? That's because of its specific heat and specific volume, right? But 1 cubic meter of water can do close to 4,200 kilojoules of heat transfer per degree change in temperature. So the transport energy that is required, right? If you see, if I had to show it this way, the heat transfer done by water of that volume would require the volume of air in those two bags. Therefore, you require a lot more volume to be transported. So therefore, you will require more transport energy and therefore higher motor size. And this is what you can see. This is data from one of our projects in Chennai, where in the same room for delivering the same cooling load, roughly the same cooling load, which is about, I would say, somewhere between 11 and 12 tons of cooling. Here we have mentioned in kilowatt thermal, translates to 11 to 12 kilowatt tons of cooling. An air handling unit is consuming about 6.7, basically fan motor. There. Whereas the pump that is using to distribute the cold water in the radiant circuits is using only 0.4 kilowatt. So this is the big difference in the distribution of energy that is required, right? And there is, as I said, there is also a saving on the chiller side. Earlier, it had to provide 7 degrees centigrade water because you wanted a low temperature in the coil, right? So you needed a 9 degrees centigrade. Now, as I said, and if you can see in this graph, the temperature of 24 degrees in the space is being maintained throughout the day, or more or less around somewhere between 27 to 24, even when your floor supply temperature, which is roughly equal to floor temperature, is around 22 degrees centigrade. Okay. So what that means is the chilled water, which was earlier supplied at 7 degrees centigrade, now can be supplied at much higher temperature, which can be 15 degrees, 16 degrees, or even 20 degrees. So what happens then is, if you look at, this is a performance graph of a Copeland compressor. Okay. So what it means basically is, in the evaporator, evaporating temperature has gone up. If the evaporating temperature has gone up, at the same condensing temperature, we will see that the output has increased from the same compressor at a slightly higher energy consumption, but overall increase in the COP of that compressor is 22% for between operating that system at 3 degrees centigrade evaporating temperature versus 10 degrees centigrade evaporating temperature. So the higher the evaporating temperature, the lower will be the energy consumption. And this can be validated. I don't have it right now in front of me, but if all of you can imagine the pH diagram, the higher you take the evaporating temperature, and therefore the suction pressure will also go up. There will be less area under the graph in the entire your typical refrigeration cycle. That if you can draw it on a pH diagram, you can see the difference. Unfortunately, I don't have it here, but that is what happens. So between this and elimination of fan motor, That's why I said you save somewhere between 30 to 50 degree, 30 to 50%. And that's a lot because in buildings, air conditioning is the biggest guzzler of energy. So if you can reduce 30 to 50%, that is a significant reduction in energy consumption. Not just that, there was a project we were involved on to some extent with IIT Roorkee, where they were trying to quantify what is the peak energy demand, because that is where the problem comes, right? Everybody is trying to use air conditioner when it is 42, 44 degrees high, and the energy demand peaks at that time. And where will we get that peak energy, right? You need to have power stations that will provide. So the more and more we can shave off the peak, the less and less we need to invest in more coal power plants, because we need to invest in our coal power plants to take care of the peak. But when peak is not there, all of them are operating at suboptimal efficiency. So the plant load factors drop, the inefficiencies come in. Okay? So those were the energy related, or no, you could say directly tie them to financial advantages of using radiant cooling. But there are non-financial advantages also, which I want to explain. They are basically better indoor air quality and uniform comfort. Let's talk about the better indoor air quality. How can radiant cooling as a technology deliver better air quality? If we are removing air as a means of heat transfer, if I'm removing air from that equation, where if I can give cooling without using air, then we can avoid recirculation of that air. If we go back to the same example that I used here, that if this air handling unit is serving 10 rooms, the return air will come from all these 10 rooms. What happens then? If there is some contamination in one room, let's say one person is sick, and in extreme cases, let's imagine one person is infected with COVID-19 in one of the rooms. What happens then? The air from that, the contaminated air from all that particular room will come and now mix with air from all other rooms and will be sent back. That mixture is again cooled and sent back. You can use HEPA filters, but HEPA filters don't stop. HEPA filters can stop any microbes above 0.3 microns. COVID-19 virus is about 0.125 microns. It will not stop it. It will go, and now the virus will continue to spread in all 10 rooms, right? So not just that, what we have to understand is when we are using air-based cooling systems, and if you are using air as a means of heat transfer, okay, we also then need to understand how we change air when we breathe. In breathing air, we are changing it in 3 ways. One, we convert oxygen into carbon dioxide. We add humidity because air has gone inside our body, and our body is 70% water, so we add water from our body comes out into the air. Thirdly, the air has gone inside my body, so whatever biocontaminants my body has, it will bring it out through the air. So if you continuously keep doing that, and if this air is recirculated every time, is sucked and recirculated, there is going to be this mixture of biocontaminants that is going to be spread all over. So recirculation of air can be avoided if you use radiant cooling. And only, of course, this would mean that we still need to provide ventilation. But ventilation or fresh air is only about 10 to 15, maybe maximum 20% of the overall energy load. So there are different projects that we have designed in the past, and we are now designing, where we are designing the buildings with 100% fresh air. Air which comes from outside once into the building goes out, doesn't recirculate in the building. Okay, so that provides a very healthy environment to be in. Why is this important? Because we can feel the thermal difference. It is, if it's 22 versus 30 degrees centigrade, right? We can feel it on our skin, on our body. That is what the operative temperature is. So we demand cooling, but change in the quality of air, whether how much is the oxygen content or how much is the carbon dioxide content, or whether there are biocontaminants or not, we cannot feel. That is to be, air sample has to be taken and tested in a lab, or you need to have CO2 sensors. Only then you will be able to tell what is the quality of air. Since we don't experience it ourselves, we tend to ignore it. But this has long-term health implications, and therefore we should pay equal importance to the health of the buildings that we are in. The more and more we air condition them, more and more we will tend to have less healthier air, unless that building has been designed to provide fresh air at the level. So this is where radiant cooling can help to provide healthier buildings. The other is, since the entire heat exchanger is spread throughout the space, the heating or cooling that we do with it will be uniform. There won't be any hot spots. Whereas in air conditioning, you will observe that person who's sitting closer to the air discharge diffuser or the grill would feel more cold versus somebody who's sitting away. So there is a difference in the comfort that is experienced by one person to another depending on where they are positioned, right? That doesn't happen, and the experience of cooling is uniform throughout the space. So I already covered this, different types of radiant cooling. I'll quickly show different installations that have been done in different parts of the country by us. This is an office space in Jaipur where radiant cooling was installed. This is in Delhi. This is an exhibition space, size like hangar. They didn't want any ducts, so we primarily reduced the requirement by using radiant cooling, and discharge of air is from the sides. The ducts are, the air delivery is from the sides. This is one of the videos I showed you, KL University, Vijayawada, where ground plus 7 floors building for library as well as lecture halls. We also use thermal storage here to significantly reduce the connected load. The chiller produces cooling in the night, which is used by the ventilation systems during the day. The chiller provides cooling to the radiant cooling system during the day. This is again another video I showed. This is a system we installed in Chennai, another project. This is a small office of 10,000 in a very large office building complex of about 10 lakh square feet. So even in smaller spaces, it can be done. This is again the warehouse that we showed. This is the factory shop floor, which is using it. I'm just trying to show in different scenarios how this has been used. This is for heating, of course, but this is an aircraft hangar. This is India's first aircraft, climate conditioned aircraft hangar, where we have installed radiant heating, because when this is in Srinagar for Indian Air Force, and so whenever you open the doors of the hangar and the aircraft has to go out, it takes almost half an hour for all that exercise to complete. And if you were to use air conditioning, all that air will escape, and to again heat it, it would take 2 hours, and after that another aircraft would come. So it would never achieve the desired temperature. But when you heat the floor, the heat remains in the floor, doesn't go out, right? And there is a lot of concrete. It's almost, this one is, I think, around 350 mm of concrete. So once you heat that much concrete, it will remain hot for a long time, and people can experience comfort while doing the work. This is a project in Ladakh where we have integrated solar, not just solar thermal, but solar PV, geothermal, and radiant heating. This is a very unique building in the entire world. We are not aware of any such building that is in an off-grid manner, because there's no power here, and the requirement is not of electricity mostly. So this is a perfect example why we need to look at energy efficient heating and cooling systems. When it was originally designed, this was designed with 800 kilowatt solar PV panels. By incorporating radiant heating, solar thermal, as well as geothermal, we were able to bring that solar photovoltaic installation down to 122 kilowatt compared to 800 kilowatt earlier. So that is why it is important, and the project became viable because of that. And it's very important that such border outposts be able to sustain themselves, provide safe environment for soldiers, because the idea behind this building it came because when Rajnath Singh ji was the Home Minister, this is a paramilitary building. He looked at it and said, there is more soldiers who die from weather-related ailments rather than enemy fire, right? So providing them a safe space to stay while they're on the duty was of paramount. So this was the first such building where solar thermal, if you see, the heat production is during the day, whereas the heat requirement is in the night. We have a very large tank, 35 kiloliter tank below the bunker in the basement here, which stores all the hot water at 70 degrees. And in the night, that hot water is circulated in these pipes which are embedded in the floor. We also have to understand that this is at a very high elevation where oxygen content in the air is low. And if there are soldiers sleeping in barracks, sometimes there are 20 people in one barrack, they will consume that oxygen pretty quickly. And the outside temperatures here in winter go up to minus 40 degrees centigrade. So it's not that they can open the windows and sleep. So fresh air has to be provided to them. Now, to provide fresh air is at minus 40. Now, if I have to heat, which means I have to either use some form of solar. Instead of that, what we did was we used Earth's heat. So we constructed these earth tubes where Earth at 5 to 6 meters is at a phase lag of about 3 months from the surface temperature. So Earth temperature at this level would be in plus. When it is minus 40, this will be around plus 5, plus 10 degrees centigrade. So that we can heat the air without using any energy generation system like solar thermal or solar PV, and provide positive temperature air first, which can be further heated a little bit, of course, and then provided to the soldiers as fresh air. So I will stop here. This is another geothermal cooling project. This is India's largest geothermal cooling project we are doing in Bhubaneswar. So I'll stop here for a few minutes just to see if there are any questions, and then I'll complete this with structured cooling. Are there any?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Madhusudan Rao. It was interesting session, and where you elaborated, that how we can reduce the load. I mean, how we can reduce the heating load and cooling load. I mean, without using air conditioning. And it's like nice discussion, because if we are able to reduce this load, yes, there's a echo. Okay, Srinivas? Okay. Now, it was.
So I have about 20 minutes of another presentation. So if there are, I'll just take questions and then we can finish. I'll just take 15 minutes to finish structure cooling also. I just paused to see if there are any questions. If there are questions, I'll handle the question. I'll answer the questions and then complete this segment, which will take me another 10-15 minutes.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Dr. Srinivas, are there any questions from the participants?
Sir?
Anyone having any question, he can ask, or he can put in the chat.
Yes, sir. This is Dr. Mohan Jagdish Kumar.
Morning.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is Dr. Mohan Jagdish Kumar. I'm working in Gayatri Vidya Parishad, Visakhapatnam, Andhra Pradesh. I have few questions. First thing is how it is sensitive to the load. So how it quickly responds, to what extent it quickly responds to the load. Because until unless you have a temperature difference between the source and the sink, the radiation heat transfer, radiation coolant will not work. Suppose if all of a sudden the load is increased, or if all of a sudden the load is decreased, so how sensitive it is to provide the cooling. And the second one is, what about the condensation of water vapor in the room where radiant cooling is providing? Because you are sending the water at a lower temperature. So have you experienced any condensation of water vapor on the walls or floor, on the roof? Any experience in your projects? And if so, how you are trying to eliminate it? These are my questions.
Let me answer one by one. First is load, right? I'll show with some examples. So this is some data. And you'll also have to give me an example. I mean, I've not seen load increasing drastically anytime, but I'll show you something which explains that the system can handle load better than the conventional systems that we are using. This is data from one of the videos that I showed, the Tech Mahindra one, where we measured, compared it to another block which was using air handling unit. So the top graph is of the temperature in the area block which is using air handling unit, that is the DBT. The red graph that you see is the temperature of the space which is using radiant cooling. This is the third graph line that you see is the temperature of the supply water to the radiant cooling system, and the bottommost one is the temperature, supply temperature to the AHU. So what you will see, this is an office, right? So at 7 o'clock, roughly about 7 o'clock, the radiant chiller cuts off because it's a dedicated system for this, we cut it off. So, which means the air conditioning system is off. What you will see is that there's no circulation, by the way, here. Okay, circulation of water has stopped here, circulation of water and air has stopped here. So even when it is not operating, forget when it's operating, okay, even when it is not operating, you will see that the temperature rise overnight. This is April 2013, April in Hyderabad. The night temperatures are relatively hotter. There will be ingress of heat. So what you see is because of this ingress of heat, there is an immediate spike in the temperature of the space which is being cooled with air. And then in the morning, it takes almost 2 hours. You know, they start it at 7 o'clock or something, so that people, by the time they come at 9 o'clock, it takes about 2 hours to bring it down to 25 degrees centigrade. Please understand, these are large buildings we are talking about, not individual rooms. So there's a lot of thermal mass there and it takes time to cool down. Whereas the block which was using radiant cooling did not exceed the temperature 25 degrees centigrade even in the morning, and then once the chiller started at the same time, they just switch it on. At no point, even in the I mean, this is 2-3 day data, you can see that the temperature has been below 25 regularly, whether the system is running or not. Okay. Why is this possible? Because here the concrete mass acts as a cushion. There's so much storage of energy that even if there is a sudden spike, we don't need to really increase the capacity of the system. The system itself has enough stored energy to take care of such a spike. Okay. One, that is passively if you have to deal. If you have to deal with it actively, see, even in AHU, the way you would deal with is by increasing the flow of the chilled water, right? Or increasing the delta. The same thing here. We are using same chilled water. Okay? So the flow, the control, even in this, we use PICVs or control valves. Basically, if the temperature is achieved, the valve is cut off. Temperature is not achieved, the flow continues. So the flow of the water, the control of flow of water controls what is the or how we take care of the load. Sudden spikes, it is possible that in very specific cases there may be, and these are mostly, in our opinion, the industrial kind of where spot cooling kind of things are required. Those sort of things Radiant cannot handle, but the regular office or educational building, these kind of loads, it's never a problem, can be handled. The second question is about the condensation. Condensation, if we are maintaining a temperature of 24 degrees and 50% RH, which is what is the typical temperature that is maintained. As I mentioned many times, the floor surface temperature is only about 20 or 22 degrees centigrade. Most cases it is 22 degrees centigrade. The dew point, if the air is at 24 degrees 50% RH, is 13.5 degrees centigrade. So unless the surface temperature is 13.5 or lower, condensation will not happen. Or there should be air at higher dew point, which means even if you want to operate this space at a higher temperature, 27 degrees 50% RH, still the floor temperature is much higher the dew point. So the only possibility where the condensation will occur is when untreated air comes into a building, okay, through cracks, fissures, or doors are not closed. These kind of situations where building is not airtight. So that is one thing people have to take care of. Building has to be airtight. Even in air conditioning, building has to be airtight. Otherwise, it the air will continue to leak. So a leaky building, air which is not airtight, is not a good candidate for installing radiant cooling, and that is why we are looking at something like structure cooling, which is what I was going to come to, which will not have the condensation concern that you raised at this point. We have this particular building is just hardly a kilometer, maybe a kilometer and a half from the shore. This is on the old Mahabalipuram Road in Chennai, if you're aware of that. And this has been operating since the last 4 or 5 years or so. Never had any condensation issue. As far as I'm aware, this is the building that is closest to the sea in India. But internationally, if you want to see, there are buildings. This is Gardens by the Bay in Singapore, where this is right next to the bay. And all these paths are cooled using radiant cooling. Bangkok airport, hot and humid. People keep coming, going out of this building. This is the world's largest radiant cooling installation. Not been a problem. Having said that, is it not a concern? It is a concern, but anybody who's involved in such projects, I assume they are good designers and will take care of these issues. Lastly, in terms of controls, we always have controls which is constantly monitoring the surface temperature and the dew point temperature, and the moment the dew point temperature is inching closer towards the surface temperature, then we cut off the wall so that further cooling doesn't happen and condensation can be prevented. I hope I answered that to your satisfaction.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, sir. One more question. One participant text Dr. Manivel. He is text. I'm reading as it is that question. Please explain MRT reference to seasons. You mentioned, please explain MRT reference to the seasons.
So, on
Dr.
the face of it,
Dr. Manivel is here.
On the face of it, MRT as a concept has nothing to do with the seasons, because in terms of formula, if you have 6 surfaces, you will have what do you call T1 into A1 plus T2 into A2 plus T3 into A3, finally divided by A1 plus A2 plus A3, A6, right? So in terms of formula, it is not dependent on seasons. But in practice, that is what exactly we see. And that is a good question for me to segue into structure cooling. Is what we see in summer is a high MRT, right? Because are very hot, okay? Whereas in monsoons and in winters, your main MRTs are lower, right? In a place like, let's say, Jalandhar, the MRT will go down in winter to maybe 10 degrees or 15 degrees, and it will remain so. That is why you feel so cold. Even the bed gets cold, right? You have to sleep in the bed and warm up the bed for some time for you to feel comfortable, right?
Yes.
Whereas in summer, we see that the MRTs will go up to maybe 40 degrees centigrade. I'll show you some thermographs. So there is a seasonal variation, and that is exactly what it affects us. If you see in terms of cooling load, and you divide it into 2 parts, one is the external load and the other is the internal load. Now, internal load, irrespective of the season, remains more or less the same. It's the same occupants, same lighting, same equipment, same TV, whatever, right?
Yes.
That is the internal load. Those are the internal heat sources, right? But it is so that doesn't change. It remains the same. But the external load, which is dependent on the ambient temperature, primarily because that's where the transmission gains come from, and the direct solar gains. These two vary, and these two contribute to a lower MRT, because in winter, if my ambient temperature is lower, which means the structure of the building structure can release the heat, if let's say my ambient in the on average after the sundown is, let's say, about 15 degrees centigrade, then what happens? Theoretically, the building external surface can reach an equilibrium up to 15 degrees, which means it can keep rejecting the heat that it accumulated and come down to 50. But in summer, what happens? The average temperature would be around 30, which means the building cannot come below 30 degrees centigrade. So it will hover around 35 degrees centigrade. In the morning, sun comes, dumps more heat, it will go to 45. So it oscillates between 35 and 45, whereas in winter, it oscillates between, let's say, 15 to 20 degrees centigrade. And that is what makes all the difference. So I'll come into structure cooling with that.
Yes.
If there are other questions, I'll handle, I'll answer them towards the end.
Okay, sir, proceed.
Thank you, sir.
So,
Thank you.
that was a good question, because the way we see it is there are two problems, the way we are dealing with, cooling today. We first let the heat come inside. We are not addressing the source of heat. We are letting the heat come inside the building. And once it has come inside our space, the space we occupy, then we use a high energy system to purge that heat, right? I started my presentation saying cooling to me is taking the heat away, right? We are using these energy guzzling equipment. We are letting the heat in, because the internal heat, as I just told you, is not much. It is external heat that is causing the problem. So we let this external heat come in and then use equipment like this. Instead of that, okay, before that, I'll just show that these are some simulation studies we have done for, peak summer day, where you will see the operative temperature doesn't change. It remains an operative temperature, as I said earlier, is a function of MRT and air temperature. This is actually the surface temperature of the ceiling at 8 p.m. in the night when outside is 28. And we all experience this in summer. When we walk inside our house, it's like an oven. But when we walk outside and are in the balcony, we don't feel the same heat, because the hot surfaces are not radiating heat to us, right? So what we are saying is, if we can flush the heat from the building itself and not let it come inside, right? To remove 40 degrees centigrade heat, we don't need cold water. We need just water at 25 degrees centigrade. If I have 25 degrees centigrade, I can flush this heat. So I don't need a chiller, right? So if you can just flush that heat out before it comes inside from the structure itself, then the buildings will remain cool. Yeah. How do we do it? This is similar to radiant cooling in terms of the network of pipes and all that, but instead of using a chiller, we use a cooling tower. And in this specific case, what we try to do is use a two-stage cooling tower. I'll explain that in a bit. Okay.
Yes.
But here we are not trying to achieve 24 degrees centigrade. We can achieve 26 to 30 degrees centigrade comfortably, depending on the season. And going back to our MRT, if we can keep the MRT lower, we can be comfortable even at higher temperature. And those of you who are interested can read up a bit on adaptive thermal comfort, specifically India model for adaptive thermal comfort, where there is a seasonal temperature that they are suggesting that we use, because it is different walking into 24 degrees from a 44 degrees centigrade ambient, because your body experiences that shock, and also body is used to a certain comfort at a temperature in different seasons. So many times what we are seeing is, even at, if you are able to lower the surface temperatures, even at 28, 29, people are comfortable. But there is a reason why we are suggesting structure cooling. The reason is mostly, apart from what I mentioned earlier, that there would be a tremendous amount of energy that is required for our cooling needs. There is also a social aspect to it, social angle to it. We see that that there is going to be a divide between people who have access to cooling or those who do not. And why is this important? See, access to cooling comfort is a developmental need. As economies prosper, okay, there will be desire in people to have that need for cooling comfort. Just as, you know, at some point, a fridge was having a refrigerator was a developmental need, right? Back in the 80s, that was it. Then it became TV. Then sometimes after that, it became having a four-wheeler, right? These are developmental aspirations of the people. Similarly, as temperatures keep on going higher and economies prosper, people will want access to cooling comfort. Okay? And people who cannot have, it means then we as a nation are not fulfilling the aspirations of our people. Why can't we do that? Because the energy is too much. We cannot build so many power plants and all that. But we can achieve those aspirations if we can significantly lower the energy that is required to cool. Okay? And we see this social divide today. All the airports are air conditioned, but nobody will even bother about talking of providing even basic comfort at a railway station or a bus station. Railway station, there will be one room, AC room, where AC will also be not running for the, one waiting room. Okay. Otherwise, people can, suffer the heat. So it should not be that way. Same is with, your private hospitals will have all the air conditioning, but the primary health centers will not have comfort even for neonatal ward. Same schools and all that. So we should be able to provide comfort. I'm not saying 24 degrees, 50%, but at least some relief from the heat, even in such buildings. So, and if you see the nature of these buildings, the way they are constructed, it is not possible to have air conditioning, right? Because these cannot be airtight, one. Two is the nature of use of these buildings, that people come, go out so many times here, that even if you try to do air conditioning, it is not possible. It will be inefficient, right? So if we just flush the heat out, okay, from these buildings, and just with fan, we can be comfortable. Because structural cooling consumes only 0.05 kilowatt per ton of cooling, whereas air conditioning consumes around 1 kilowatt per ton of cooling. So that's a significant, around 95% less energy consumption, which should make it affordable for most buildings. So this is a technology that was recognized by MIT in a worldwide contest for commercial and industrial energy efficiency. So we have implemented these in hostels, because all of you are from educational institutions. You understand very well, if you have to air condition the hostels, what all problems will be faced. If you're trying to do that using split ACs, the remotes will go missing, the compressors will just honk off pretty soon, because who is responsible for it? How will you make students responsible for it? What is the guarantee that people will not run air conditioner opening the windows, right? So that is why these hostel dormitories, all IIMs now, even IIT Hyderabad has this. I think IIM Mandi also has this. All IITs and new IITs and IIMs, all the hostel dormitories are using this, where you just flush out the heat from the structure, and it is naturally ventilated. No dew point issue, because you're always supplying water above the ambient dew point. So there's no question of condensation. This is in VIT, where the architectural college building is using structured cooling. There's no compressor-based cooling. And this is a building in Chennai, of all places. This is a 6,000 square feet building, which normally people would use somewhere between 40 to 50 tons of split ACs for such a building. They've used only 13 tons now, because they have reduced the load significantly. And those 13 tons AC also they use only when if it is required at the peak in summer. Otherwise, they are just comfortable with fan and natural ventilation. This is another installation. The building picture I don't have, but this is a two-stage cooling tower that we are using everywhere. This is from Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology in Pune. It's been more than around, I think, 7 years since this installation is there. Again, no compressor here. Quick word on what a two-stage cooling tower is. In two-stage cooling tower, what we use is, where is that chart? Instead of going to the wet bulb towards wet bulb, normally cooling towers deliver wet bulb +2 to wet bulb +5 temperature. But if you have a two-stage cooling, where in the first stage, if you have what do you call a pre-cooler, if you see, where is that picture? So if you have air that is pre-cooled along the psychrometric chart, it will just go parallel to straight towards the dew point. There's no addition of humidity here. There is just sensible cooling of that, which lowers the wet bulb temperature of that air, and therefore then when you do evaporative cooling, you get a lower temperature, typically lower than the original wet bulb you get. In some places you can get wet bulb -2 to wet bulb -2.5 temperature, which makes a significant difference in terms of the cooling comfort that we can deliver. Okay, so from there I'll just quickly skip. I already talked about these projects. Sometimes people ask how low can the temperature be given. This is a penguin cage, of course, in Berlin, not here, where -4 is being maintained. These capillary mats are embedded in this. This is a zoo. This is a solar integrated, solar cooling integrated stadium, football stadium. Qatar is going to host Soccer World Cup in 2022. And the way they convinced was because it gets very hot in summer. Traditionally, Soccer World Cup happens in summer. The question before FIFA was, how will Qatar provide comfort to the players who are playing, because summer is peak there, I mean 45, 48. What they did was they embedded pipes under the soccer field and circulated cold water, and that is how they could provide the comfort and convince FIFA. The reverse of this was already demonstrated in 2010 when the Soccer World Cup happened in South Africa. June in South Africa is winter, right? So there they actually circulated hot water so that the players can feel comfortable while playing. So there are applications like this in terms of how radiant cooling, solar, radiant heating. I've already explained how solar energy is being used with radiant heating. So this is where I will stop now because it's 11 o'clock, and if there are any questions, I will answer them, and then after a break,
Yes.
we will continue on this.
Thank you, Dr. Madhusudan. Really, it was a quite lot of information, lot of knowledge regarding how we could reduce the load. Because when we are reducing the load, obviously we are reducing the energy demand also.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
that should be our objective, because we should reduce the cooling load or the heating load in the building, because that should be how the building should be designed. So you have told the various method by which we could reduce the heating load or the cooling load, and thereby we could even reduce the electrical demand, right? So this is what we need. So it was a really useful discussion, and I hope that all the participants must have got lot of information which they could use at their place while designing the building. Lot of the ideas we can use. So really, thanks, Dr. Madhusudan.
Fine, sir. You're welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your very informative, interesting, and wonderful discussion on radiative cooling with the great industrial applications. And really, it is a nice experience by seeing all your achievements at the national level and including to serve the art people.
Hello.
Yes, dear.
May
Now,
I ask a question?
yes, you may proceed. Yes.
Yes,
Participants, interact.
Sir, would you please tell something about the heat island effect?
I've not done much work on heat island effect, and I'm not sure. I mean, it's something that everybody is aware of in terms of how heat radiated from one building to another raises the temperature, but I would keep that as a separate discussion, and can have the questions related to what I presented. I'll be happy to answer those. I hope you don't mind.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
really, it was wonderful. Discussion. So all the participants must have benefited from it, because only thing is we should try to reduce the load. I mean, heating as well as cooling by simply designing the building. And these steps, will eliminate, the air conditioning load or the heating load, and it will be also having beneficial effect as far as health is concerned. As he has highlighted that when you are in the air conditioning, you are playing with the air. Either you are ventilating or mixing the air, so that thing could be avoided in the design which he has Madhusudan has suggested. Really, it was wonderful. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Srinivas.
Thank you,
You're
sir.
welcome.
I have a
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Now, one participant is asking question.
how will the light how will uh, like it's dependent on
Hello?
am I audible?
Yes. Hari Krishna, proceed.
Yeah. So how will the life of the structure be like affected if it will be affected? Will it be affected? Life of the
So,
structure.
sir, as from what I understand, your question is if by embedding these pipes, will the integrity of the structure be affected? Is that your question? I'm not an expert structural engineer, but every time we have to put these pipes, we always get it vetted by the structural engineer, because they have to approve this, right? Anything we do with the structure. So in every time we have done it, we have not had any problem from the structural engineers. In many cases, in some cases where actually it provided further reinforcement to the structure, because the pipes, within the pressurized pipes, provide further reinforcement. In some cases, there was an additional mesh also put just to tie these pipes, so that mesh provided additional reinforcement. It has only been an advantage in whichever projects that we have worked, not a disadvantage. And
So
if you
was
want to
the cost
avoid,
justifiable then?
just to add to what I said, if you want to avoid such this thing, anyway, you have an option of embedding the pipes in the floor, which will have no questions raised with regard to the structure.
Okay, sir. 11:30.
So the cost is justifiable.
Yes, of course. That's why you are able to see so many buildings that have adopted this. Okay. So, Dr. Srinivas, what I would request is, if there are no further questions,
Yes, yes, sir.
I would like to request to see if we can start at 11:45. I just have
Okay.
to be
Okay,
finished
okay.
late. Just give me time till 11:45.
Okay.
We'll start at 11:45 if you don't mind.
Thank you,
Okay.
sir. Thank you. And
All right. Thank you all. Yeah.
okay, sir.
Thank
Bye,
you.
sir.
Yeah. Bye.
Dear participants, the next second lecture we are starting 11:45. Please join sharply at the time 11:45. Thank you. Now we are closing this session. Thank you, sir. Ajay Trehan, sir. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Yeah, it was nice. Yeah. Lot of information, good information. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah. This was, in fact, this is what is desired, when you are designing the building.
Yeah,
All
that
of
industrial
it should be
taste.
promoted.
Always industrial taste is nice.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, in fact, good. Very nice.
Okay, sir. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Dr. Srinivas, for giving me the opportunity to chair this session.
Thank you, sir.
And really, I enjoyed. Really, well, good, really.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.